Today's episode of Client Calls on the Luminous is with John. John is an experienced practitioner. He has the tools, he has the knowledge, and he has the wisdom of his inner experience and his connection to the divine, to Source. And yet John, I think, struggles with something that many of us struggle with on our spiritual journey, and that is the moments where we feel like we are cut off. We feel like somehow we are disconnected, as if we missed something or we got it wrong, and the ensuing sense of shame or fear or anxiety that arises where the voice in our head is saying, you messed it up, you didn't do it right, you didn't meditate enough, you weren't clear enough, you weren't devoted enough, you weren't working hard enough, and the ensuing experience that, oh my God, I'm being punished, I'm being cut off, I'm being excluded. John understands that this is a false belief, and I think like all of us, he has the wherewithal to see that he's somehow stuck inside a story from his limited or his small perspective, and yet the fact remains that he still feels stuck sometimes. He still feels cut off sometimes, and he still feels unable to proceed in a way that reconnects him with the truth and the light and the love that is always present. So in today's conversation on the Luminous, this episode of Client Calls is really about how do I move through that sense of being stuck, that sense of being ashamed that somehow I got it wrong, and get back to center and get back to Source. That's what we're going to talk about on today's episode of The Luminous. Welcome to The Luminous, the podcast where we shine a light on human consciousness, personal sovereignty, and spiritual transformation and bring it down to earth. My name is Amar. For over a decade, I've supported people in reconnecting with their divine gifts, inner wisdom, and creative abilities. You are far more powerful than you've been led to believe. I intend to help you reclaim that power. My name is Amar, and this is The Luminous. Hey everybody, it's me, Amar. Welcome to The Luminous and another installment of Client Calls. I cannot tell you how excited I am for this project to continue. It has been so wonderful already just to have the experience, first of all, of being inspired again. I have been in a creative desert for what feels like months, and this inspiration and this epiphany that I had about a month and a half ago now to begin this series felt like frickin' water after having been in the desert for 3 days and being thirsty and parched and dry. So for me, in and of itself, just the inspiration and the excitement of being able to create something that feels rewarding and fulfilling has been reward in and of itself. And then to hear your feedback, your comments, and your support about how this also really lit you up, inspired you, and really gave you some insight and some direction, that is gravy. That is the cherry on the cake, and I could not be happier. So thank you, everybody who took the time to offer your feedback, to reach out and say, I love this, good job, keep going. It really means the world to me. And again, if you're interested in participating in this and you would like to potentially be on one of these episodes, you can email me at podcast@amar.energy. That's podcast@amar.energy. Put client calls in the subject line and then share your question, your curiosity, your issue, your block, whatever. And if I feel like it's something that's well suited for this format, I'll reach out to you, I'll respond, and we will set up a time to record an episode together. Today's conversation is with John. John is so wise and so connected and so deeply in tune with his internal experience, his intuitive, emotional, kind of abstract self. And he, like all of us, has those moments that despite the knowledge, despite the experience, despite his practice, he still has those times of feeling lost or that he's somehow cut off. I'm going to read his email to you to give you a bigger context of where he was when we sat down to record our conversation. He says, Hey, Amar. For someone who's practicing solo, I've been in places where I feel that I've lost the thread or that I'm out of chances, that I'm not going to get any more hints from Source before I have to just do something about whatever stage or challenge I'm facing. And I've recognized recently that that's all a story in my small self, one that very effectively cuts me off from Source. The question then is how to get past that false belief in a way that gets the juice flowing again. I loved this conversation with John, and I think mostly because this is such a universal experience. I think no matter how much work we've done, no matter how many things we know, no matter how many courses we've taken or videos we've watched or books we've read, We're still having that very human experience from time to time of feeling like, did I just lose it? Did I go wrong? Did I go left when I should have gone right? Did I fuck it up somehow? And I also understand that sense of shame that generally follows those questions of, oh my God, I got it wrong. Oh my God, I pissed spirit off. And it's almost feeling like a little kid who's terrified that they're going to lose the love and the approval of mom and dad. And I understand how disempowering and disabling that thought can be. And what I know is when we're in those moments of feeling lost or feeling stuck, it really is usually a sign that we are somehow in our mind, in a story, and in a belief system that has simply created a temporary version of reality that feels really small, that feels really tight, really uncomfortable. And we find ourselves suddenly feeling totally uncertain, like we're back to square one and we don't know what to do. John's conversation with me today falls into the category of what I would call the reminders. I find that generally speaking, my client work falls into one of three categories. Either someone wants confirmation of what they already kind of know, or they want permission to do something that they've already kind of decided that they're going to do, or like in John's case, they simply need a reminder that they are powerful. They are bright and brilliant beyond measure, that they are an infinite being who came to experience a finite moment of life, and the truth that we are always loved, we are always supported, and we are always held in the embrace of spirit. And oftentimes, when we find ourselves on these dead ends of these mental stories and these old beliefs and these old wounds, that has simply created a temporary construct where we forget that, where we do feel disconnected, where we do feel like we've been forsaken or that we're bereft. And what I know is that when I believe that I am cut off from source, it's simply a reminder that I am somehow cut off from myself. So I hope that in the conversation with John today, you find a reminder that helps you reclaim the truth that you are never cut off. You're perhaps just looking in the wrong direction, or you've momentarily forgotten. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Hello, my friend John. I'm so happy to see you. Thank you so much for volunteering to be a part of this.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, and let's just jump right in. So tell me what it is that inspired you to reach out. What's on your mind and in your heart today?
Well, it's been at times a difficult question to phrase, but I've been practicing in different ways solo for it's been a few years now, to different levels of seriousness, and um also being someone that has a lot of experience in a 12-step uh environment. It's funny how different attitudes around spirituality can kind of blend or bleed into one another. And I've recognized in many different ways that my relationship to spirit at times is colored by a lot of um, critical or limiting attitudes. I feel like I've got an employer or a boss that I may disappoint at times, and just a lot of, family background and things like that in there too. It's a whole fun mix. Uh, I still can't believe at times that theoretically a part of myself chose this, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I can get into these points, and something that comes to mind that has been a real refrain for me is an axiom by Carolyn Elliott, um, that shame is the magic killer.
Mm,
And it's gotten easier over time to sort of like get out of that place. But like, as someone who's prone to depression, it's like when we lose momentum,
yeah.
and I'm disqualifying myself from the aid of spirit, and just making that decision on behalf of spirit unconsciously, that like not only, not that I don't want it, of course I do, but I don't deserve it, you
Yeah.
know? And I gotta go fumble around in the dark for a while until I remember, like, hey, dummy, like,
The light's over there.
yeah, yeah. And also it's free,
Yeah.
it's just light.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think, I appreciate your question. I appreciate your vulnerability and your honesty, and I can feel the depth of just kind of what you've been doing internally. And so it feels to me like you have a pretty well explored and fully realized inner landscape. And that's really how I think of it. And if you look at my background, this idea of sort of traversing the mountain peaks and the fact that it's nighttime and there are stars shining, I think a lot of the work that we do, especially when we're also going through very real life situations, like you're talking about your 12 step and you're talking about your experience with being depressed or depression. And those are very real human experiences. And I think that, we also bring into the room the part of the conversation that says, yeah, on some level, part of me chose this. And I think that, when I hear about shame and when I talk about shame, to me, shame is someone else's idea of how I should be living my life or what I should be achieving or how I should be achieving it. And that doesn't change the experience that shame can be very real. And I think of the New Order song, Guilt is a Useless Emotion. And I love that title. And I just remind myself of that over and over in those moments where I feel like I've lost my way or things are kind of dark and I'm going, what the fuck happened? Like, how did I get here? So I think the first thing, that came to mind as you were sharing is the deep, dark void experiences of feeling depressed or feeling lost or feeling hopeless or ashamed. I think that is just as much a part of the spiritual journey as the light, bright, shiny, magical, mystical, otherworldly experiences. And I think that ultimately, God, I wish I would start writing down my sources, but there's a Native American perspective that talks about how man, the human, is the bridge between heaven and earth. And that we are really the ones that bring in these higher experiences, these exalted perspectives, the higher self, the soul, as a channel for spirit, however we want to look at it. We're the one bringing that to the ground, to the planet. We are the vessel for the infinite spark in a finite form. And so I think the first thing to acknowledge is that even in your darkest, most frustrated, or oblivious moments, you're still held. Spirit is still there. Because I know that even the darkness comes from that source. Because light, there can be no darkness without light. Light is what defines the darkness. To use Abraham Hicks, you don't go into a room and turn on the dark switch. So light is always there. It's just always a matter of how far away is it, or how far away do I perceive it to be, or how much am I allowing it to come into the room? And there's a lesson that my team and Spirit was really, hammering, lovingly hammering into me years ago. It's the velvet hammer. That's what I call it. It's beautiful and it looks really soft and pretty and it's ornate, but it's a fucking hammer all the same. And it was, there's nothing you can ever say or do that will place you outside of my love for you. And it was this image of this spotlight on a stage and this pool of light that is eternally always there. And I can step out of it. I can run to the dark corner of the theater and hide from it. I can put on a blindfold and go into the fetal position and turn away from it. I can try to destroy myself. And it still shines and it's always available. So I think that when we take the perspective as ourselves as sort of like the middleman, so to speak, I don't know why I'm thinking The Office and like we're Dunder Mifflin, right? Like we're not really making anything. We're just the conduit that the stuff moves through. And sometimes spirit is holding us. Sometimes it is allowing ourselves to be embraced by that, free from any requirement. We don't have to do anything to be worthy of that. The way that I look at it is we are worthy because we're here. The fact that you are alive and have a body and have, a soul, a fragment of source itself, the fact that you have a timeline and helpers and an agenda from that spiritual perspective and that, you're breathing today, to me, that is evidence that you are worthy. Because if you weren't worthy, spirit would not have chosen to experience itself as John Martin. And if you were done, right, if the checklist had been completed and the soul was like, okay, that was fun, I'm done with being in John, it would be over. And a lot of this sounds like platitudes, but I think when we really allow ourselves to own that as truth and then begin to inhabit our life from that perspective, we can see that sometimes we are the one being embraced, and sometimes it is us collapsing into that embrace and allowing ourselves to be in whatever state we are.
Hmm.
Whether I'm lost, whether I've forgotten, whether I haven't meditated in 3 weeks, whether I've been, disregarding my daily practice and I'm starting to feel a little bit untethered and a little bit frayed at the edges, whether I am dedicated and showing discipline and devotion every single day. Regardless, I'm still within the embrace of spirit. I'm still within the spectrum of all that is. The way that I look at it is you are spiritual when you are at the grocery store, when you're having your morning coffee, when you are cursing at someone in traffic. My reminder is when I'm in the self-checkout line behind someone who doesn't know how to use it. I'm like, my God, would you please figure this out before you get to the grocery store? But even in those moments, we're still within the purview of spirit. So I think allowing yourself to see that sometimes you're the one being held. And then in those moments where you're dealing with inner turmoil or you're feeling divided or separated, that is your job to hold yourself. That is your time to cease, because it's a fractal experience. We find these geometries and these systems on all levels. And what I know to be true is if something is true on some level, and true in the capital T sense that it's an actual objective spiritual truth, if something is true on one level, it is true on all levels. And you understand that from your magic practice. I know that, as above, so below, right? There's a reflection of my experience somewhere else in the universe, and all I have to do is shift my perspective to see that. So from that fractal perspective, spirit shows us how to love unconditionally. Spirit is allowing it all to happen, from the scary, most atrocious to the most beautiful and most pristine experiences. It's all within the field of allowance. So I think that we can see that spirit is giving us a model for how to love ourselves in the way that we are loved. So our job essentially is just to remember, okay, spirit has already shown me how to do this because here I am. It's already being allowed. Wherever I am, whatever I'm feeling, it's happening. I'm here. I'm not being denied this experience. And that, I think, is a reminder that those are the moments to put our arms around ourselves and say, it's okay. I understand you're afraid. I understand you're frustrated. I understand you may feel lost or whatever, and it's okay. I think sometimes we have this idea that we always have to be, I call it the love and light syndrome, right? Love and light, everything's great. It's, to me, it's the equivalent of the Christian thing, hate the sin, love the sinner. So I think it's, this sort of false, empty kind of thing. And I'm not bashing love and light. I think that's an important part of the experience to bring into the room. But it's also, I think it's love in everything. Because everything is light. And science shows us this. So I think that when we allow ourselves to remember, okay, this is not my brightest, my happiest moment. This is not my proudest moment. I'm feeling small. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling judgmental. I'm feeling entitled. Okay. And I'm still within the arms of spirit. So I think it's about just remembering that. And I think it's also understanding that, the way I look at it is when we're born and up until about 5 to 7 years old, we're kind of the purest version of the human that we can be. I think that when we are, infants don't necessarily have the language to express what they're experiencing. And I think that that's what allows them to be so pure. And we watch an infant, they are taking in everything. They are just soaking it up. There is no division of themselves from themselves. And I see that as we're born right next to the campfire. And over time, as we grow up and evolve and realize, like, oh, sometimes in this world, we say one thing and do another. Sometimes in this world, we do things we don't want to do because we feel like we need to or have to, whatever. And over time, those choices move us away from the campfire. But it's still there. And I think the spiritual awakening is when we sort of wake up and pivot and go, fuck, look how far away the campfire is. So the minute that we realize that, we begin to return. So I think that when we boil it all down, the only thing that's ever happening with any choice and any decision is one of two things. I'm either moving towards my truth or away from it. And sometimes the only way I know is how I feel. And sometimes the truth is that I am not happy. Sometimes the truth is that I am really frustrated, I'm lost, and I'm confused, and I'm in the void, and I don't know how to make sense of it. And I think when we refuse to judge ourselves and say, well, this is where I am. So perhaps it's a shift in value judgments. Perhaps it's, rather than saying I'm good or bad, right or wrong, perhaps it's just saying, I don't know why I'm here, but I know there's value. I don't have to know even to know that there's a reason that I'm here. And I don't have to be the villain, and I don't have to be the hero. I don't have to be right. I don't have to be wrong. I can simply be where I am and allow myself to sit. And then I can ask myself, and this is one of my favorite questions: do I need to be a witness here or a participant? Because the witness is when I can just sit and be with myself and acknowledge, yes, I want to cry. Yes, I want to scream. Yes, I'm freaked out. And when we acknowledge it, and I assume that your 12-step background would inform this, right? When you just acknowledge where you are, then that informs what to do, right? Okay, I need support. Okay, I need to go for a walk. Okay, I need a nap. Okay, I need to eat something. And then if I'm a witness, that gives me one perspective. And then when it's time to be a participant, then I can say, okay, I witnessed myself in my emotional state. I allowed it to move through me, and now I can do something. Now I can take action. Is this making sense?
For sure. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, it's funny, things were really stuck for a couple months, and 'cause I'm in like a new job, and it's a bunch of shit happening all at once. Um, and active writing is one of my practices that I try for somewhat regularly, although they haven't been it's been more hammer than velvet
Yeah.
recently. Mainly because it's like, I've been in one of these circles of like being told what to do and not enjoying the terms, not agreeing with the terms by which action is required. And one of the last things that they said to me was like, part of what you're learning now is how to meet effort on its proper plane. Um, so I was trying to spiritually bypass my way into a better sleep routine, you know, and it's like that's not gonna work, you know. um, and then about 3 weeks ago, I finally relented and got back on medication, which I've been on for years, and I went off for years. Uh, and there was so much like spiritual pride around what was perceived as like a step backwards, but the voice that was making that judgment was definitely not from a high place.
Yeah.
It's the same voice that was trying to bypass the need for a better bedtime, right? And I love, I mean, two things that really stuck out to me. One is that, yeah, like being held, or sometimes deciding to hold ourselves, and like the discernment of those things, I feel is so. I mean, first off, you got to recognize that you need to be held in the first place, right? And then it's like, who's going to do it? Me or it? Um, yeah. I mean, it reminds me of a very 12-step phrase, God moves mountains, but bring a shovel, right? Um, yeah. And then one of the other things that really stuck out was when you mentioned like platitudes and resistance to that sometimes. Like platitudes are platitudes for a reason, because generally they apply, right? But like that's definitely one of the areas where it can be such a useful foil for me to recognize how resistant I am to something that, whether or not it has connected with me personally in the past, I'm definitely a very cerebral type by nature, and I've had to remember how to be intuitive.
Yeah.
And that's one of the best ways to check in with like where I am, is like if I hear something, not even love and lighty, but like something even like as above, so below. If I'm not happy with the below, then I'll just be like, ah, yeah, as above, so below. Oh,
Whatever.
so it's on fire up there too? Okay,
Right. So
fine.
it sucks up there.
Oh, cool, great. Yeah, yeah, instead of yeah, finding that grain of willingness to just shift by 5 degrees,
Yeah.
and at least try to consider something different.
Well, and I think the trick with platitudes is that it's easy to understand mentally. It's a simple thing to understand, but simple is not easy. And I think that's why the mind often rejects it. And I think of Noguchi, the artist and the designer, sculptor, and his famous coffee table, that triangle coffee table with a very minimal wood. And his whole um, theory behind and philosophy behind that coffee table was to get it to the point where it is so reduced down to the necessary elements that you take away any other piece of it and it is no longer a functional table. And I think of that all of the time, that simple is not easy. And when I was a makeup artist and used to train other makeup artists, I would always be able to spot a new makeup artist because they would pull out every single color in the rainbow and they wanted to put them all on the face at the same time. But the master makeup artist is the one that you can give them two products and they can make someone look absolutely stunning. And so the simplicity that is required to understand what is necessary here. And it's usually a very subtle thing, but the mind wants it to be complicated. The mind wants it to be no pain, no gain. The mind wants it to be the puzzle to solve, right? And if I'm a hammer, all I need is a nail.
Yeah.
But simplicity is not easy
And all they
because
get
it
very upset when
requires
I
a
follow
purity.
board.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
requires a purity. So I always think of the Rumi quote, live the questions. Live the questions. I may not get an answer. And sometimes closure means I have to move on without knowing why it happened, without the equation balancing. And in those moments, that is my job to hold myself and say, baby, I understand. You're frustrated. You're angry. It doesn't make sense. You're so smart. You're so intelligent. Of course, you're flabbergasted that you can't make sense of what seems very, very easy. But sometimes we just have to allow it to be what it is. And I think there's another piece. Sometimes spirit calls us just to set it down in the middle of the room. And I've gone through this many times in my life where I say, I don't know what to do.
Mm.
And, my favorite prayer is, Spirit, help me remember. Help me remember how to do this. I know that there's a part of my soul that knows how to do this. It has already done this. Help me remember. And that's what you said. And I loved that. I'm not learning how to use my intuition. I'm remembering because we're already intuitive. So I think sometimes we just have to say, I'm not giving up. I'm giving in. I don't know what to do with this. So I'm setting it down on the table. I'm going to go do something else. I'll check back in occasionally. If you need me, let me know. But I can't just continue to bang my head against the wall because that's not what spirit wants either.
Yeah.
And sometimes things are difficult because they're difficult.
Yeah. And that's been huge right now. Yeah, absolutely. Is like I've actually stepped back from a lot of like I would do like morning card draws and things, and I just felt that they weren't connecting anymore. Like not quite pearls before swine, but like it's been, and of course, being already in a place that is restrictive and not free flowing, it's easy to then point to my small self and be like, oh, there's something wrong here, or like, again, not even on the deserving level, just like the downstream conclusions of that. It's like clearly it's my fault because there has to be someone at fault because that's how this brain works, right? um yeah, yeah. And in the better moments, absolutely, it's like I need to be paying attention to other things right now, like what I do with a meditative state once I get up off the cushion, right? Can I carry that with me through the day? Or am I going to forget as soon as somebody crosses me 20 minutes later?
Totally. Or
Yeah.
you get in the self-checkout line at the grocery store. And I think, a mentor years ago told me the number one thing that will liberate you is to delete the need to know. Just delete it. It doesn't matter because you will be shown one way or another. And sometimes knowing is understanding that when it doesn't make sense from my human perspective, that just means that it's a higher level of me that's moving the pieces on the chessboard. So I can just say, I don't know. I'm up against, Magnus Carlsen right now. I'm up against the world's greatest freaking chess player, and I don't know how to get my way through this or out of it. So I'm just going to get up and walk away. And when it's time for me to move, let me know. But I think that we often, again, we turn everything into a nail and we're looking for a solution and we're looking for a reason. And sometimes it doesn't make sense until later on down the road. You know, it's like when you're trying to remember something and you can't, so you walk away from it, and then suddenly at 3 in the morning you awaken and the answer's there.
Mm.
So I think it's when we just relax and kind of hands off and say, I don't know, thy will be done. This doesn't make sense. And then that informs me of where my work is with my emotional self, with my, with my anger or my frustration or my disillusionment. Then that gives me a sign that it's time for me to hold myself and do whatever practices allow me to work through that. But I think when we can just remember that it's a fractal expression and we always have a model somewhere, there's always a model somewhere. And if I don't have it currently at the surface of my awareness, that's when I can say, okay, Spirit, I need you to remind me, or I'm going to go refocus myself on something completely different. And in those moments where you don't know what to do, I think a beautiful way to approach it is just to stop, kind of lean back, take a breath, drop in, and say, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? I am the vessel, so breathe into me. And sometimes our job is to go sit in the park and watch the clouds. Sometimes our job is to get junk food and watch Netflix. Like really, sometimes our job is just to allow ourselves to be distracted, allow ourselves to find comfort, to give ourselves what we need in those moments and not feel guilty about it. Because I think, when you were talking about like taking medication and how there was sort of this shame around that and sort of a judgment of that choice. Look, we can talk all day long about the pharmaceutical industry, but that's not what it's about. Spirit has also allowed the creation of these systems, and we all need a crutch sometimes. We all need, something to get us through a moment. So whatever it is, we just have to make sure that it's something that ultimately works for us, that it's the best choice that we have in the moment, and that we're really leaning on the systems of support that we have. But I think it really begins with just checking in and saying, am I the one that's being held? Am I supposed to just collapse into the embrace? Or is it something within me that needs to be pulled close and given the acceptance that it is and it's okay? Because to me, unconditional love is a neutral state. It just is. Because unconditional means exactly that. There's no requirement. The light is shining, and all you have to do is step into it. And then you can sit down and go, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do, but at least I remember that I'm in the light. At least I remember that it's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not being punished. And there's no need for shame. And whatever that voice is, then I can pull that close and say, all right, you little fucker, tell me what your message is. You've been beating me up. Oh, here we go. The clock is going to chime for what feels like an eternity. But when we can pull those parts of us close and remind it that it's okay for it to exist, right? I don't need you to be anything other than what you are, because I need the part of me that's belligerent. I need the part of me that's evasive. At some point, that will become the thing that I need. So I am not banishing you. I'm just saying, come here and tell me what you know. I don't want to fix you. I don't want to change you. You're not broken. I just want to hear what you're saying because you've been hounding me. So what's the message, babe? What's the message here? So think of it as you're the sovereign, you're on the throne, and it's part of you is just seeking an audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can just say, thank you for your story.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely one of the ways, again, back to 12-step stuff that these difficult times become validating is that like over time those very dearly paid for lessons become the stuff that helps others. And I've seen that be true of a lot of people, both in the experiences that we carry in from being out there in the dark, but also the things that happen to us once we are sober and connected to some type of spiritual solution. Yeah. It's just it's just I think this time has been strange because there have been spiritual challenges overlaid on top of very dissonant physical challenges. And I felt like I don't have the bandwidth to address everything. I've got to kind of pick and choose. And I can see myself having been reactive, very reactive, instead of responding, and just choice, decision fatigue gets tiring. And not feeling like really able or haven't been able to charge back up per se. It takes what it takes, right?
Yeah, and I
Pain.
think sometimes the practice is just to dial it down. I think sometimes the practice is just presence. I'm just going to sit and breathe and stare at the wall.
Yeah.
And I also remind myself that, I think of the Olympics and, when the greatest athletes on the planet get there, they're not saying, wow, this is hard. And so I remind myself that the soul chose this because it is the Olympics. Earth is it's the place to be. And the beauty of there are so many things that can only be experienced through the physical body, the sensuality of the human experience, and our ability to create using our emotional state and our energetic field, and how that's a very real part of it. There are things that can only be done through a physical form. And so I think when we remember that the body wants what we want, it's just the body has its own timeline. The body's working through density. The body has gravity and inertia and, physical laws and scientific truths to work through. So it's still light, it's just slowed way down. So sometimes the moment is just saying, you know what, the body needs some downtime. I need to be horizontal. I need the phone off. I need, whatever it is that I need. So I think it's, again, broadening our perspective of what spirituality is, expanding our ideas of what's allowed and what's not, and just remembering that it all has value and I don't have to know. All I have to know is right now I need quiet. Right now I need support. Right now I need help or whatever it is. And we just give it to ourselves in the best way that we can. And we're not always going to get it right. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you fucked up. I mean, I think of the Fool card in the Tarot, right? I don't know what I'm good at because I haven't tried anything, so I'm good at everything. So I'll just blithely move towards the cliff's edge and trust that I'll have something to land on or remember how to fly on the way down. Either way, I'm good.
This dog's got me. It's cool.
And I have my little satchel over my shoulder.
That's right.
Exactly. So I think it's just, giving ourselves the grace of allowance and just remember that unconditional love is neutral. So when we don't know what to do, just be with yourself. Just simply be. And one of my favorite prompts, if you're looking for one for journaling, since you're a writer, when you're feeling an urge, when you're feeling a desire, when you're feeling something that doesn't make sense or doesn't feel safe, you say, you can do whatever you want. You just have to tell me why. And that immediately peels back that facade and it gets right to the heart of what's really going on emotionally and energetically.
Yeah. It reminds me of, something that we like to call them spiritual advisors, or our spiritual board of directors. One of my guys says this often. What am I pretending not to understand?
I love that. I love that. Yeah, and to use your language, what have I forgotten here?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's just remembering all of that as often as we can. And I'm a big fan of Post-its. I have it everywhere around my desk, on my monitor. And I'll just put it wherever I can to remind me. A man after my own heart. Okay, we're speaking the same language.
You know what it is.
Yeah. So it's just those reminders. It brings you back to the center. It brings you back to the campfire. It reminds you, okay, I've already been here before. Oh my God, I love that. It's just given.
A funny thing about actually the Post-its, because there's I had some of these up here for years. And I feel like it's kind of relevant, is like at a certain point, they become background,
Mhm.
you know? When those words have been there for so long and your brain just sort of sorts them into like, this is just part of the environment. And I'll remember sometimes when I'm sitting here to actually look at what some of these things say.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that metaphor can be extended into the set pieces of life that aren't yellow and square.
Right. Right. And I think of it as a ladder. The rung that you're reaching for inevitably will be the one you're standing on. You just have to keep climbing. So
Mm.
whatever it is that we're aspiring to understand or to know will at some point be the mundane thing that, like, oh yeah, I take it for granted. Everyone does it this way. So I think to never underestimate what we know, and like you said, what has been hard earned and hard won, and to take those moments to realize when it is whatever it is. Wow, it's really good right now. Wow, it's really fucking hard right now. Wow, I want to crawl in a hole and hide right now. Okay, cool. Then you've acknowledged where you are. You've given yourself the grace. You didn't have to earn it. I just said, I know where you are. I feel you. I see you. I hear you. I'm with you. And do you need me to witness you, or do you need me to do something?
Mm.
And just go from there.
Right on.
Thank you for your question. I think it's a really powerful one. And I know that this is going to resonate with a lot of people.
Well, all we do is show up as honestly as we can, right?
Yeah. And it's the clarity of our example that I think is what liberation is all about.
Mm.
Someone sees what else is possible through the lens of someone else's experience, it immediately eradicates the thought that I can't do that and that can't be done or that's not possible. Yes, it is, because I just saw John do it.
Mm. Yeah,
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you for reaching out.
Of course. Take care.
All right.
Thank you so much for listening today, friend. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with John. I know it was one that I felt to be incredibly powerful and really enjoyed being a part in. Again, if you want to participate, you can send me an email at podcast@amar.energy. That's podcast@amar.energy, and just put client calls in the subject line and then let me know what it is that's on your mind or in your heart. You can find me on Instagram at Amar Energy, and then also the account for the Luminous podcast is theluminous.podcast. You can find me on YouTube at Amar Energy, and that's where you can view the video versions of these conversations. So if you're like me and you like to have a visual component, then you can find those on my YouTube channel at Amar Energy. If you would like to work with me privately one-on-one, you can go to my website, amar.energy. There you'll have access to my events calendar. You can also find my booking calendar for private sessions. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. I really appreciate it. I love you. Have a great day.